Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, there can be no doubt the aged care sector is in absolute crisis. It's a crisis of confidence, it's a crisis of care. The decision by the Morrison government to send the Australian Defence Force into aged care puts it absolutely beyond a shadow of doubt. Aged care in Australia is in crisis. But it's not just the pandemic, it's 9 years of disgraceful neglect of senior Australians. We had a Royal Commission report that cost $104 million that went for 2 years that told us that 2/3 of residents in aged care today are malnourished. They are literally starving in the care of their own government. That Royal Commission report was tossed aside by Scott Morrison with barely any of the recommendations fully implemented to date. So this is the point. As Australians, do we value older people as they age? And do we value and respect the people who are caring for them? Deputy Speaker, I give a voice to people in Gilmore, aged care workers telling me about their everyday experiences. Susan is an assistant in nursing. Susan said to me, "We've got the government telling us that we're managing. We're not. You've got the government saying everything's fine. It's not. They've offered $800, which is a slap in the face. None of us work full-time, only part-time, so there's no way that you're even going to get the $800. And besides that, we want the money to go into care. We want more staff. We want ratios. There remains no law to having a registered nurse on site 24/7. How do you manage without a registered nurse? What do you do when nobody's there for 60 people? What do I do? Susan exclaims. I can't just turn and walk away. It's affecting all the residents. They're frightened. Deputy Speaker, during COVID, at least a quarter of the aged care workforce is gone and they can't replace them. In January, the sector estimated that about 140,000 shifts were going unfilled, about a quarter of the shifts. The Minister for Home Affairs, Karen Andrews, has talked about the surge workforce. Putting things in perspective, this is filling about 1,000 shifts a week, so less than 1% of the demand. I'm glad that after delaying too long, the Prime Minister has finally seen some sense and brought in the emergency support of the Australian Defence Force. But unfortunately, with this Prime Minister, it's always too little, too late. What has he been doing for the last 6 weeks while this emergency situation has persisted in aged care? What we're seeing is Richard Colbeck at the cricket and Scott Morrison doing photo ops in hairdressing salons while older Australians sat in aged care not being properly cared for. Clearly, the government needs to do much more. Deputy Speaker, Glenn is a registered nurse that works in aged care, normally works locally in Gilmore, but due to COVID, he's part of a flying squad working in aged care homes with COVID outbreaks. Glenn says the outbreak infects the residents and the outbreak affects the staff. When staff get infected, they have to stay off the roster and you have no capacity to deliver the services that you need to deliver. Glenn says there is no way you can deliver the service safely and with quality. In the first fortnight of last month, Glenn put in 184 hours, which is way over his normal workload. This fortnight, Glenn will work another 144 hours just to keep the place functioning, not to deliver the model of care, just to keep things functioning. Glenn says there is a very simple solution to get the resources we need. The simplest solution would have been not to neglect the aged care system for all those years. The second solution would have been to act on the 120 recommendations of the Aged Care Royal Commission. The further tragedy here is that this was foreseeable. There is not one aspect of this calamity that could not be forecast by those working in the industry. The medical profession, the nursing profession, the carers have been flagging the problem since the beginning of the pandemic and have been ignored. Aged care workers are overworked and undervalued. Scott Morrison has failed aged care workers who are doing their best but are exhausted, running out of PPE and don't have access to RATs. The years of government neglect experienced by the aged care system culminating in the crisis today. I implore the government to do more before it's too late.